Welcome to this edition of the People's Playbook podcast. I have to tell you, I'm pretty stoked today. I have Matt Rolfe in the studio today, and Matt is well known to a lot of people, but specifically in the hospitality world, he's a hospitality leadership coach. I'll say leadership as well because he branches out of hospitality as well at times. He's a keynote speaker. He's an author of an excellent book called "You Can't Do It Alone," which I have a copy of and recommend it highly. He's helped thousands of leaders actually build stronger skill sets and lead their teams to become better individuals, to, build healthier cultures and become more profitable in the hospitality business. Matt, welcome to the show today.
Jason, thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be fun today. I've been looking forward to this episode because, Matt, you've done so much coaching throughout your career and you worked for so many different leaders along the time. So you've coached, let's say, over 100,000 hospitality leaders. For sure you have, right? What's that one leadership pattern you see repeated across, the very best of teams?
Overcommitment is one thing. One thing I learned when I started doing this was trying to coach through priorities and plans.
Yeah.
One thing I realized that great leaders are doing, and they often have an awakening moment themselves, is how do we do less really, really well? And we've all heard that before, but even some of the best teams are overcommitted with really good intentions and desires, and there's an outcome that they want. But the reality is, if we want to do things at a great level, one of the opportunities is how do we really focus on what matters most right now?
Yeah. Why do you think they overcommit? Is it because I'm just wondering, is it because they think, hey, I have to have the answers for everything? Or is it just, hey, I want to solve everybody's problems? Why do you think they overcommit?
Yeah, I think, from my personal lesson, and I'll share my story, is the more I was doing, the more valued I thought I was to my team members. So if I worked more hours, did more, took more on,
Yeah.
I was more important, more valued, more cared for. And the opposite was actually true. What I was doing, I was stepping in on my people's work. I was taking over. I was helicoptering my feedback. And I would say that echoes through to a lot of leaders. And I was talking to one this morning, and he said, my job is to make sure my people don't fail. But one thing he said he's realizing is by doing that, he's not allowing his people to grow. So I think there's a reason. So people that are overcommitted, I don't say just do less. There's a conversation ahead of that. There's a deeper conversation to really unpack it. It's usually how we grew up. I think what I found is the root of there's something that happened as you were growing up as a kid or a teenager that started to build that foundation.
Yeah.
So how do we go back and be generous with ourselves? Because it's not just do less. We've got to get more connected to the story or the purpose of why we're behaving that way. And for me, it took a lot of work and a bit of therapy.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. No, and I love how vocal you are and how transparent you are about the therapy.
Yeah.
Matt, when you talked about, I love this road you're going down right now. Do you think that, trying to do everything is more of a young leadership trait or a more tenured leadership trait? So I know you still think I'm in my 20s, but I'm not. But I did things much differently as a 25, 26, 27-year-old. And I believe with leadership without titles as well. But I think some of the things I look at back when I was in my 20s and 30s and leading a team, I might even go, oh, why did I do it that way? And when I'm 54, right? So what are the differences between younger leaders and more tenured leaders?
Yeah, my experience is it's, our identity in relationship to our work and our life. And that might sound like a big piece. In my 20s, a lot of my identity was my work. In my 30s, a lot of my identity was my work. I got some life lessons as I got older, as I had kids, as I wasn't able or didn't want to do 80-hour work weeks anymore. I find there's usually an event or a moment or a period in time that allows you to look at it differently. So part of who I was in my 20s and 30s was awesome and got me where I am today. But in order to where I want to get to now, I needed to make a change. And I was in a business group, entrepreneurs organization, and I almost had like an intervention. You get to present like once a quarter or once every 6 months, depending on the size of your group. And my group brought me in. I will remember this day for the rest of my life. They said, when we met you and you were doing all this stuff, it seemed really cool. And you were doing great things and it got us all excited. What we just felt is you're unfocused and you're a bit out of control. And they were saying it with love and respect and not working with them. They're a peer group. But they said doing more doesn't always produce a better result. So that was my pause moment. At times I overcommit, but I think my identity shifted where much more comfortable in my skin and success at work or financial gain at work's not going to balance my life anymore. So, and I do see some younger generations that are much more balanced. I have some people that work for me that are incredibly high performing leaders and they work 50 hours or less a week. And that's like, they're pretty clear. That's what I'm getting. They're not willing to do the 80.
Yeah.
And they probably should.
It's so different, the generation that we were in as opposed to the one that's coming up now. And there's no right or wrong, right?
No.
It's just people are different, right? And I love that. I guess I almost want to call it a smack in the face that your peer group gave, because I, as well, Matt, have had the same smack in the face, right? Like, hey, Jay, I know you like to move at that speed. I know you like to do all that stuff in of the day. I actually don't.
Yeah.
And by the way, I think one of the smacks in my face was, I think you're doing a whole bunch of things good. I don't think you're doing anything really great right now. And wow, first of all, it was like, woof, that kind of stung, right? And
Yeah.
then once the stinging and the burn kind of took away, it was like, okay, they've got a good point there. And you adjust and you pivot. And it's amazing when somebody close to you, an entrepreneur group, I'm in an entrepreneurial group as well, when they say, hey, you know what? Like, settle down and just let's focus and let's follow up on that stuff. Right.
One of the celebrity leaders I've got a chance to work with, they're the most in control. Like it was always surprising me to see, the person deem it the most success, or I might really look at their values and see the most success, well-balanced family, really growing organization, significant financial wealth, and they were always in balance. Like I remember meeting Mark McEwen from the McEwen Group, who some might know from shows like Top Chef, and doing work with him, and he didn't have a laptop. I
Yeah.
was like, once I got to know him, I'm like, what's the deal? He's like,
Yeah.
I don't show it to anybody. Like, I don't need it. And he was just bouncing. Not to say that's where I'm going. It was an
Yeah.
example that the path I was on probably wasn't the same.
What I think they have in common is they give trust to their team, right? And trust and communication actually breed integrity. And they actually, I used to think that person's not going to do it the way I can do it. But then somebody stopped me one day and said, hey, what if they do it 85% the way you do it, or 75% even? So what? You know what I mean? I have to tell you, I had Marty St. Louis from the Montreal Canadiens came and spoke to our group the other day.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And he said something that was really just resonated with me. He's very, very, just a really good person, good human being. And we were talking about a decision he had to make on the bench, whether he was going to pull the goalie in the playoffs or not, because the goalie allowed 3 goals in on 5 shots. And he whispered something to his assistant coach. And we asked him, we said, what did you whisper to your coach? And he said, I whispered, can you please, signal up to the box and find from our goalie coach if I should pull him or not.
Wow.
And he said, ultimately, I knew that was my decision as the head coach. But he said, I was going on emotion and I needed to bring logic into that decision. And I needed to trust my team that I hired to do a specific job. And the goalie coach is specifically hired to use logic when looking at a net keeper. And he said, the goalie coach said, don't pull him. They weren't all his fault. And even though it's hard right now, don't pull him. And they won that game. But Marty said, listen, he said, if it was up to me at that time, I would have went emotion. Let's yank him. He's done. Right. But he said, I didn't. I went with logic and look what happened. Right. So I think as leaders, lots of times we just have to look at a little more logic, take the emotion out and actually put the trust in our team and communicate.
Yeah. I think it's a brilliant example. I can still remember watching and seeing the replay of the whisper in the ear,
Yeah.
but also what you're sharing there is just being present to emotion. One thing I've done a lot of work and I can feel emotion in my body before I'm going to say something. Some of my favorite calls, I'll get a couple every month from a leader in their car saying, I can't go in the office yet. I'm too emotional. It's like, okay, just pause. Like give yourself some grace. Like take just 3 minutes or get outside perspective to make the decision you need to make. Cause when we're emotionally charged, when I am, I don't always make the best decision.
Yeah. And it's great when you can just actually be self-aware enough and say, you know what, I don't react. So many times I want to get on that laptop and I think I see that email and I think, oh, I am going to respond to that right now. Yeah. When you sit back as a leader and you just say, whoa, I'm not going to respond to that right now. I'm just going to give it an hour, give it 2 hours. It is funny when you come back even half hour later, you think, whew, thankfully I didn't send that email, right? Because it made no sense. I was speaking out of emotion and not logic. Matt, you often have been quoted as saying as leadership is a people problem, right? Not a strategy problem, right? What's the biggest mindset that leaders have to shift to make that happen?
Just to focus on, I think the one thing is, we can process our way, try to process our way through any situation or put plans in place or initiatives. But I think it's the teams and the leaders who step back and really think of, what does support for me look like for my people right now? Do I really have a people strategy?
Yeah.
And I say that with care. And it's not to say that you got to go out and do a big people strategy plan, but what are you doing to show up for your people the way that they need, not only in their development, but in a lot of most of the time, what I've seen is that leaders, so even if it's your direct reports, they want time with you. whether it's a GM in a restaurant or a CEO of a company. So how do we create space and time to have a conversation that's not directly related to business performance? And how are we showing up consistently for our people? Right now, they say 70% of people are expressing feeling lonely in life and at work.
Yeah.
60% are burnt out. Those statistics don't scare me. I get really excited because it's a low hanging fruit to shift the conversation.
Yeah.
But if you don't, not only is it there, you're not going to get the output, you're going to get the turnover, and that's one of the most expensive costs.
Love that. Speaking about burnout, great segue. So hospitality in particular
Yeah.
actually is known for burnout, right? It's a fast moving, high turnover industry and sector. What leadership habit quietly creates it before anyone actually even notices it?
I think the key, when we look inside of any environment is communication. So when we stop communicating how we're performing, what we're doing, and where we're going, I think it's really easy for people to lose sight. My phone rings every week, and this surprises people from C-level or director level or VP level leaders that call me and say, I think I have to leave the organization because I no longer know where I fit. This is coming at that senior tier of, large scale national chains or
Yeah.
regional seaside restaurant groups. So think about the person that's in a management position. So, our job and it changed. I'm not a big statistic person, but people that are bought into a vision bigger themselves are 4 times more engaged. So if we just show them, if we don't show them the vision, people get lost and there's a lot of choice out there for employment right now. Or it's not that they pick up and leave. They just don't have the performance because they're not sure that they fit. So I think the biggest shift right now is to make sure that, do we know where the company's going? Do I still align? Why should I care?
Yeah.
And the conversation's good. Like I get pushback all the time is, are you in agreement for what you expect of the people is the question. And I get, well, I just did that last quarter. Well, a lot's changed since last quarter.
Yeah.
But look what's happened. We're halfway through the year as we record this. There's been a lot of change no matter what industry you're in right now.
Yeah. Absolutely. What a great thought. So speaking about the people that call you work with hundreds of restaurant brands, right? What separates cultures that consistently retain those great people from those who are constantly hiring?
Yeah, I think it's a level of, to keep it simple, are we in agreement with what's expected of our people? So often we get hired and there's a job description and a role and we go and do a job, but that shifts and the expectation changes. And it doesn't mean you haven't sat across in your monthly, weekly, or quarterly meeting and said, this is what we want. It's, are we in agreement of what execution looks like? Meaning, do I have the space and time to do the work that matters most? What we do is we coach out, I'm not talking plan out 45 hours a year week. If I can plan out 8 to 12 hours of a leader's week inside a restaurant or whatever operation, we can get the output. But are we in agreement where we can give them that time? Do they have the support above them? Meaning we're getting the direction, the coaching, recognition, and reward. And also do they have the team below them? Meaning that because often somebody will go back and say, I know what you want me to do, but I'm short 20% of my staff, or sales are up, or POS system's not working, whatever it is. So I can't, although I want to, I can't. So we're not in agreement. So I think the biggest shift of do we retain or not is are we in absolute agreement with our people on both sides of the team?
Great answer, Matt. So your book,
Yep.
you can't do it alone. First, I'd love to talk about the name and how you came up with that name, right? And I obviously have a good understanding of it. I've read it. It's an excellent book and highly recommend it to anybody, any leader and whatnot. But what made you say, hey, I'm going to keep, you obviously saw something within that leadership group and what you were working in that made you name that title. So just talk about that title for a second, if you could.
Yeah. So I looked at, the difference between leaders as, we work with what we consider the top 10% of the market, and certain leaders can scale the organizations and others will get involved in it. And what I watched not over months, but years working with different people is their ability to understand that success comes from enrolling the team, and really engaging the team. And really our job is to be at service of them. I remember talking to the publisher and they had a whole bunch of different ideas. And I said, what about this? And they said, no. And I went back and talked and I'm like, no, I'm not doing this to sell hooks and books. Like, I think I pay Amazon every time I sell a book. I got to pay them 10 cents rather than them paying me $1. It's about the education out to the market. And I still remember, there was an incoming president to the Joey Restaurant Group wing. It was a big shift because the other outgoing president was basically a founder and partner.
Okay.
And just looking at his side of just how remarkable his approach was to knowing that they were doubling in size, significant base, and knowing that it would do it all. And that was, and then I went in and had the conversation with talent leaders, and this is the language. And it was also a reminder. It's not a reminder that we get the opportunity to bring others on this journey with us. That's really exciting.
Yeah, what a great answer. So I'm not sure if and who follows you and whatnot on social, but I will say this to the audience. If you need to follow somebody, follow Matt because he has some great stuff. He's regular in his posting. LinkedIn, I love his LinkedIn posts. Matt, I see a lot of those posts where you're walking in somewhere or you're in a restaurant or you've just left a restaurant and whatnot. And I'd love to ask you this. When you walk into a restaurant and look for 5 minutes, what tells you whether, how healthy their leadership is just by walking in there for 5 minutes?
Yeah. I think it'd be the same if I walked into any business. One thing I've learned as a coach is I'm watching physical cues, not words. So you can see, 70% of our results are driven by how we show up. I call it, or Tony Robbins calls it, who told me to call this our physical state. So how we're showing up. You can really see somebody eyes up, head up, they don't necessarily need to be smiling. Someone's got to be working hard, but
Yeah.
you can feel the culture. So what I'm looking when I walk into a great restaurant, or I walked into a strategy session with a really great group that, if you're in Canada, you know them. And I walked in and I said, and I closed my bag and I said, "We're not ready." I said, "We're not getting to the slides. We're not having the conversation. Something was wrong." And they said, "No, it's not." And 5 minutes later, it all started to unpack. So you can see a lot just by being generous and being curious.
Being present too, right?
Yeah.
Wow, great stuff. So part of your journey and what you're very vocal about is encouraging leaders to prioritize wellness, right? And take time for themselves. How do you convince high achievers that move fast, are constantly being proactive to actually rest and show them that that's actually going to improve their performance? And I'll give you a caveat. So many times I talk to a leader and it's almost a bragging right. Hey, I can go on 5 hours sleep, or you know what, I can do this in six. I can do 6 hours sleep and still perform that. And it's almost this like myth that you think, oh, that's a sign of look at me, look what I can do on no sleep. How do you actually take that myth and squash it and just say, hey, you know what, rest, prioritize, be well?
Yeah, I think there's a stage for all of us as leaders when we start to look just outside the role. And some of us, there's periods of time where maybe you're building a business and it's a 5-year plan and you're head down for 5 years and that's life. But you've got a strategy, a vision, and possibly an exit in the plan as well. And go get it. But for a lot of us, the fundamental shift and what it was for me is, if I wasn't balanced, I could do well at work, but I couldn't show up to support my kids. Like there's what I find is, where's the emotional leverage? And then maybe it's not just kids, or, am I taking care of myself? Or there's a doctor visit that's a wake up. I'd have, somebody call me and say, the doctor said I'm overweight and I've got to get back to work. I've had that doctor's meeting. It was an outside factor that,
We all have.
yeah, well, right. But I think the side, it's like this, at a certain point, as we, see this leadership success, whether that's responsibility, title, or financial, but at a certain point that starts to balance. So I've got great leaders. They work really hard and they work a lot. And I don't believe in balance. I work really hard and I work a lot of hours. I believe in what Jason said up front is, but I am present.
Yeah.
And I wasn't until, a handful or a decade ago. But now wherever I am, my phone's down, I'm with my kids. If
Yeah.
I'm with my friends, if I'm with myself, if I've got to recharge. So I think I'm not the one to believe in 8 to 10 hour workdays. I'd be a hypocrite if I said that. But I am a believer that I do need to find some balance. And I've learned the hard way too. I burnt out. I flat out burnt out in my career and had to deal with the repercussions of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I hate bringing this up every podcast, but we have to because it's the age we live in. So there's this little thing called AI. I don't know if you've heard about it, right? So it's
Yeah.
it's yeah. So AI, it's changing every industry, Matt.
Yep.
And what do you think, and where do you think hospitality leaders should embrace that technology? And where should they never replace the human touch? Because hospitality is very much about interaction, communication, the human being and whatnot. So how do you kind of juggle AI in the hospitality industry versus that human element?
Yeah, I get really excited about this because it's starting to become more clear. But I think how we hire leaders in hospitality will change. It is for the bigger groups, it's changing now. The reason being is back then, predictive ordering, food costing, scheduling, and you can take that to any industry, right? That's not good to me. We're all selling a
Sure.
product person. But basically, on where technology can take us, it's going to be able to do that better, faster, and not in the future today. It still needs a human touch and review and understanding. But I think the opportunity is to utilize technology to create more space and time for us to invest in our people and our guests. One thing for hospitality, we are one of the last human to human connection businesses that are left. Sure, we're going to get kiosks and ordering a new solution, sure, but we have the ability to connect with humans and create them an experience. And I'm really excited about that. But I think for any leader, it's, how do you stay curious? How do you start to embrace whatever you can put your hands on to understand AI? And the challenge is it's not a choice, but I don't see it eliminating jobs. Sure, there might be back end production in years to come. And the one thing I also know is we don't know what they're building or creating. The
Yeah.
36-month roadmap is pretty exciting for hospitality. The 10-year, who knows? But I think what I'm helping my clients do is how do we embrace change? I'm not trying to be an expert on technology, but how do we make sure that what we buy from the sexy tech company can actually be implemented and produce the result that it's bought for?
Love that. I love that. Yeah. And again, it's here, it's never leaving, but at the same time, how do we actually grasp it and use it to our advantage, but still be that human being? Matt, you've been generous with your time. I just got a couple more questions for you. So one thing I want to ask you is you've coached so many people. If someone actually leaves a team that you've coached, what do you hope they remember about the leader they became, not just the results they achieved?
Yeah, I think, part of when we're leaving, we see the transition. I think there's a whole bunch of opportunity, whether you're leaving or not, to look back at what you've done.
Okay.
Dan Sullivan owns a company called Strategic Coach here, and in Toronto. It's one of the world's biggest coaching companies. And he wrote a book, The Gap in the Game. And just to bring it into 1 minute, he said, we can't actually see things we haven't achieved yet, but we can pause today and look back 90 days and realize what we've accomplished. Sometimes I want leaders to do is to stop, whether they're leaving or not. If you're leaving, there's great experiences inside that. If it's a hostile exit, there's still great experiences. In most cases, it's just a transition. I want them to recognize how you've grown, who you've impacted. And what usually ends up happening, it wasn't the initiative or the process, it was how you worked with other people to produce the result. And that's always a reminder, no matter what industry you're in, the results matter, but the relationships matter more.
Absolutely love that. Matt, leadership's a journey. And I'll close off with this. And I just kind of want to get your response to this. Leadership's a journey. And we're thrown into it a lot of times. All of a sudden, we get a team that we lead. We've never done it before and whatnot. But we struggle through it and we kind of, make our way around and whatnot. And to our point earlier in this conversation, we evolve as leaders. So if I was talking to, Matt over a coffee and just saying, hey, Matt, if you could go back to your younger self and, give your younger self a piece of advice on leadership and just what you need to do differently because you've come back from the age you are now to talk to that 20 some odd year old Matt, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
I think like the deeper answer that, one that when I'd say is that you're enough, right? I think I spent a lot of my career realizing if I didn't work, harder, faster, try to be better, that I wasn't going to get the opportunity. And I think a lot of people around me saw the potential, but I was so head down that I probably hindered some of my potential. I got in my own way. So I think the key thing is work hard, but be patient and be intentional, and that it's not all about work. That's how, like I gave, there's a couple of business startups at a young age, started as an entrepreneur at 25. It really wasn't that important.
Yeah.
It was. That's some of the things that I spent, sleepless nights over. They,
Yeah.
they weren't that important. So I think one thing I realized is not absolute energy or force, consistency.
Yeah. Consistency. Consistency. Great answer. Matt, with that, listen, you've been amazing with your time today. I appreciate you. I appreciate what you do for the industry. I also appreciate just your road to making people better leaders and, driving an industry that needs really great leaders to help fuel that industry. It's evident in the work you do and the social aspect that you post in the speeches that I've seen you do and whatnot. So thank you. Keep going down this road. We need you. And I appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Matty. If you loved that session and that conversation as much as I did, would love to have you join our People Playbook community in the link below.